Have you ever noticed that life does not hurt you the most when things go wrong, but when you fight what is happening, when you argue with reality in your mind, when you replay moments that have already passed? When you wish people were different, time would slow down, or life would finally listen to you. Buddhism teaches a quiet truth that changes everything. Life is not crushing you, your resistance to life is. The moment you stop fighting what is, the mind softens, the heart relaxes, and a strange calm appears, not because your problems disappeared, but because you finally stopped wrestling with them. This is not about giving up. It is about letting go. It is about discovering why fighting life is making you miserable, and how peace begins the moment you stop pushing against the current and allow life to carry you. 1. Fighting reality is fighting yourself. Buddhism teaches that reality does not wait for your approval, your understanding, or your readiness. Life moves according to causes and conditions that were set in motion long before your wishes, plans, or expectations entered the picture. Seasons change without asking permission. People grow, drift, or leave without consulting your feelings. Circumstances shift quietly, sometimes overnight. When you resist these movements, you are not correcting life or making it fairer. You are creating a silent conflict within your own mind. That inner conflict slowly steals peace, clarity, and emotional strength. Many people believe that suffering comes directly from painful events, such as loss, rejection, failure, or disappointment. Buddhism reveals a deeper and more uncomfortable truth. The pain itself is often brief, but suffering is prolonged by resistance. Suffering is born the moment the mind says, "This should not be happening," while reality continues to unfold exactly as it is. The world moves forward, but the mind stands still, arguing with facts that cannot be changed. This inner argument drains energy and creates emotional exhaustion. The heart pays the price for a battle that cannot be won. Think about how often the mind replays the same moment, wishing it had gone differently. A conversation you wish you handled better, a person you wish had stayed, a situation you wish never happened. Buddhism teaches that this mental replay is not healing, it is resistance. It is the mind refusing to accept what already exists. Reality does not respond to arguments, it simply continues. And the longer you argue with it, the deeper your suffering becomes. Nature offers a simple lesson. When rain falls, it does not pause to ask if the timing is convenient. When night arrives, it does not wait until you feel ready to rest. When leaves fall from a tree, they do not apologize for changing seasons. In the same way, people change. Relationships evolve. Chapters close. Some endings arrive without explanation or closure. Fighting these truths does not stop them. It only creates tension, frustration, and bitterness inside you. Letting go, in Buddhism, does not mean approving of everything that happens or pretending that pain does not exist. It does not mean surrendering your values or becoming passive. Letting go begins with quiet acceptance. Acceptance means seeing reality clearly without adding anger, blame, judgment, or resistance. It means acknowledging what is happening without turning it into a personal war inside your mind. When you stop arguing with life, something gentle begins to happen. The body relaxes, the breath deepens, the mind softens. You realize that peace was never blocked by circumstances, but by resistance. The moment you stop fighting reality, you stop fighting yourself. And in that moment, healing begins naturally, without force, without effort, and without struggle. 2. The need to control life is what keeps you tired and anxious. Buddhism teaches that much of human suffering comes from the constant desire to control what was never meant to be controlled. From the moment you wake up, the mind tries to manage outcomes. You try to control how people treat you, how situations unfold, how quickly things should improve, and how life should reward your efforts. At first, this feels responsible and necessary, but slowly it becomes exhausting. The mind never rests because life refuses to obey. Control creates the illusion of safety. It tells you that if you plan enough, worry enough, or push hard enough, you can protect yourself from pain. But life does not move in straight lines. It changes direction without warning. People behave in ways you did not expect. Opportunities arrive late. Answers come slowly. When reality refuses to follow your script, frustration grows. Anxiety tightens the chest. The heart feels restless, always waiting for something to finally settle. Buddhism reminds us that control is not strength. It is often fear wearing the mask of discipline, the fear of uncertainty, the fear of loss, the fear of not being enough if things fall apart. When you try to control everything, you place an unbearable burden on your own mind. You become tense, hyper-aware, and emotionally rigid. Life begins to feel like a constant problem to be solved, instead of an experience to be lived. Impermanence is one of the core teachings of Buddhism. Everything is changing, whether you agree with it or not. Bodies age, emotions shift, relationships transform. Even your own thoughts are never the same from one moment to the next. Trying to control an impermanent world is like trying to hold water tightly in your hands. The harder you grip, the faster it slips away, and the more frustrated you become. Letting go does not mean becoming careless or irresponsible. It means recognizing the limits of your control. You can choose your actions, your intentions, and your attitude. But you cannot command outcomes, timing, or other people's inner worlds. When you understand this deeply, a great weight lifts from your shoulders. You stop blaming yourself for what you could never manage in the first place. When control loosens, something unexpected happens. Energy returns. The mind becomes flexible. You respond instead of react. You adapt instead of resist. Peace begins to grow, not because life suddenly becomes predictable, but because you stop demanding certainty from an uncertain world. Buddhism teaches that true stability does not come from controlling life. It comes from trusting your ability to meet life as it unfolds. When you stop trying to dominate every moment, you finally have space to breathe. And in that space, calm begins to replace anxiety, acceptance replaces tension, and life feels lighter without losing its depth. 3. Attachment turns temporary pain into long-term suffering. Buddhism teaches that pain is a natural part of being alive, but suffering is something the mind creates through attachment. Pain happens when life changes. Suffering begins when the mind refuses to accept that change. Many people confuse these two, believing that suffering is unavoidable. In truth, much of what we call suffering is the result of holding on too tightly to things that were never meant to stay the same. Attachment is the belief that happiness depends on people, situations, or feelings remaining exactly as we want them to be. We attach to relationships and expect them to last forever in the same form. We attach to success and expect it to protect us from future pain. We attach to comfort and believe it should never be disturbed. Buddhism teaches that this belief quietly sets us up for disappointment, fear, and anxiety. Everything in life is impermanent. Emotions rise and fall. People grow and change. Circumstances shift without warning. Even joy does not remain constant. When we cling to pleasant experiences, we begin to fear their ending. When we cling to people, we begin to fear abandonment. When we cling to identities, we fear losing our sense decisions might be. The moment something we are attached to begins to change, the mind reacts with resistance. It replays memories, compares the present to the past, and asks why things are no longer the same. This mental struggle extends pain far beyond the original event. What could have been a moment of sadness becomes months or years of inner conflict. Buddhism does not teach you to stop loving, caring, or enjoying life. It teaches you to love without clinging, to care without possession, to experience joy without demanding that it last forever. When attachment softens, love becomes purer and less fearful. You can appreciate people for who they are now, not for who you need them to be. Letting go of attachment does not mean loss becomes painless. It means loss becomes honest. You feel sadness, but it moves through you instead of hardening into bitterness. You remember without being trapped. You move forward without feeling guilty for doing so. When you release attachment, the heart learns a powerful truth. You do not need life to stay the same in order to be at peace. You only need the courage to meet change with awareness and compassion. In that understanding, suffering loosens its grip, and peace becomes possible again. 4. Resisting your emotions is the quiet way you keep yourself trapped. Buddhism teaches that emotions are not enemies. They are natural responses to life as it unfolds. Sadness arises when something meaningful changes. Anger appears when boundaries feel crossed. Fear surfaces when the future feels uncertain. These emotions are not signs of weakness or failure. They are part of being human. Suffering begins not because emotions exist, but because we fight against them. Many people grow up believing they must always stay strong, calm, or positive. They learn to suppress sadness, hide fear, and push anger away as quickly as possible. On the surface, this may look like emotional control. In reality, it is emotional resistance. Buddhism teaches that whatever you resist does not disappear. It settles deeper in the mind, quietly influencing thoughts, reactions, and behavior without being seen. When you resist an emotion, the body tightens, the breath becomes shallow, the mind becomes restless. Thoughts begin to circle around the feeling you are trying to escape. The emotion grows stronger, not weaker, because it is being denied the space to move naturally. What could have been a passing wave becomes a storm that lingers. Mindfulness, a central practice in Buddhism, offers a different approach. Instead of pushing emotions away, you turn toward them gently. You observe what is happening without judgment. You notice the sensation in the body, the thoughts in the mind, and the urge to react. You do not label the emotion as good or bad. You simply allow it to exist. This simple act of allowing creates space. When an emotion is seen clearly and accepted, it begins to soften on its own. It rises, expresses itself, and eventually fades, just like everything else in life. Buddhism teaches that emotions are temporary visitors, not permanent residents. They only stay longer when they are resisted or feared. Resisting emotions also keeps you trapped in old patterns. Unfelt grief turns into numbness. Unexpressed anger becomes resentment. Ignored fear turns into anxiety. Over time, the mind becomes crowded with unprocessed emotions, making life feel heavy and overwhelming, even during peaceful moments. Letting go does not mean acting on every emotion or being controlled by them. It means allowing yourself to feel without being consumed. You can experience anger without becoming cruel. You can feel sadness without falling into despair. You can acknowledge fear without letting it decide your future. When emotions are met with awareness instead of resistance, they lose their power to dominate you. Buddhism teaches that you are not your emotions. You are the awareness that observes them. Just as the sky is not harmed by passing clouds, your true nature remains untouched by temporary feelings. When you stop fighting your emotions, you stop fighting yourself. In that gentleness, inner freedom slowly begins to grow. 5. When you see life as an enemy, you suffer more than necessary. Buddhism teaches that much of our misery comes from the belief that life is against us. When difficulties arise, the mind often creates a story that something has gone wrong, that life is being unfair, or that we are being singled out for hardship. This belief quietly turns everyday challenges into emotional battles. Instead of meeting life with understanding, we begin to meet it with suspicion, frustration, and fear. When life is seen as an enemy, every obstacle feels personal. Delays feel like punishments. Loss feels like betrayal. Struggle feels like proof that something is wrong with you. The mind begins asking, "Why is this happening to me?" rather than calmly observing what is happening. This shift in perspective adds a layer of suffering that was never required. Buddhism reminds us that life does not operate on reward and punishment. It moves through causes and conditions. Events unfold because of countless factors coming together, not because of personal worth or failure. Rain does not fall to punish the earth. It falls because the conditions are right. In the same way, challenges appear not to harm you, but because life is constantly changing. When you fight life by believing it is your enemy, the heart hardens, trust fades, the nervous system stays on high alert. Even peaceful moments are overshadowed by fear of the next problem. This state of inner tension is exhausting, and over time it drains joy from experiences that were once simple and nourishing. Buddhism offers a gentler way of seeing. Life is not attacking you, it is shaping you. Each difficulty carries information. Each struggle reveals where attachment, fear, or resistance still lives inside the mind. When challenges are met with awareness instead of hostility, they become teachers rather than threats. This does not mean denying pain or pretending everything is positive. It means changing your relationship with difficulty. Instead of asking why life is doing this to you, you begin to ask what life is showing you. Instead of resisting discomfort, you learn from it. In this shift, suffering begins to loosen. When life is no longer seen as an enemy, consider how the heart softens. You stop bracing yourself constantly. You stop expecting harm around every corner. You begin to trust your ability to meet whatever arises with patience and wisdom. This trust creates emotional stability that no external situation can provide. Letting go of the belief that life is against you does not make challenges disappear, but it changes how deeply they hurt. You move through difficulty without adding bitterness, self-blame, or resentment. You become resilient without becoming hard, calm without becoming distant. Buddhism teaches that peace does not come from a life without struggle. It comes from a mind that no longer fights struggle as if it were a personal enemy. When you stop fighting life, life stops feeling like a battle. And in that surrender, clarity, strength, and quiet happiness begin to grow. 6. Peace appears when you stop forcing life to make sense. Buddhism teaches that much of our suffering comes from the constant demand that life must make sense immediately. The mind wants clear answers, clear timelines, and clear reasons. When events do not fit into a logical story, frustration begins to grow. You replay moments in your head, searching for meaning, fairness, or explanation. Why did this happen now? Why did that person change? Why did things fall apart when you were trying your best? This endless questioning feels natural, but it quietly keeps the mind restless and unsettled. The truth is that life does not reveal its meaning all at once. Causes and conditions unfold over time, often in ways that are impossible to understand in the moment. Buddhism reminds us that the mind suffers when it insists on clarity before it is ready to receive it. When you force life to explain itself on your schedule, you create tension inside yourself. You begin to feel lost, impatient, and emotionally overwhelmed, not because life is cruel, but because you are demanding certainty in an uncertain world. Many people believe peace will arrive once everything makes sense, once they understand why the pain happened, once they see the purpose behind the loss, once the future becomes clear. Buddhism teaches something radically different. Peace does not wait for understanding. Peace arrives when you stop demanding it. When you allow life to be unclear without turning that uncertainty into fear or panic, the heart begins to relax. Forcing life to make sense often looks like mental overactivity. The mind analyzes every detail, replays conversations, imagines alternate outcomes, and searches for someone or something to blame. This constant mental movement keeps the nervous system activated. Even during quiet moments, the mind remains busy trying to solve a problem that does not yet have an answer. Over time, this creates emotional exhaustion and deep dissatisfaction. Letting go, in the Buddhist sense, does not mean giving up on understanding or growth. It means recognizing that some clarity only comes with time, distance, and lived experience. Just as muddy water clears when left undisturbed, the mind becomes clearer when it stops forcing conclusions. When you allow uncertainty to exist without resistance, wisdom has space to arise naturally. Buddhism teaches trust in the unfolding. This does not mean blind faith or passive waiting. It means trusting that life is moving, even when you cannot see where it is going. It means trusting that not all lessons arrive in clear language. Some lessons arrive as confusion, silence, or pause. When you stop fighting these phases, they stop feeling like failures and begin to feel like transitions. Peace grows quietly when you stop asking life to justify itself. You begin to live more fully in the present moment, instead of mentally chasing explanations that belong to the future. You respond to what is in front of you, rather than what you wish were different. This presence brings a sense of groundedness that does not depend on perfect understanding. In time, meaning often reveals itself naturally. What once felt senseless begins to make quiet sense through growth, strength, or perspective. But even if it never fully does, Buddhism teaches that peace does not depend on complete answers. Peace depends on acceptance, patience, and the willingness to live without constant certainty. When you stop forcing life to make sense, you stop exhausting your mind. You allow mystery without fear. You allow unfolding without control. And in that allowance, a deep, steady peace begins to take root, not because life explained itself, but because you stopped fighting its silence. 7. Happiness begins the moment you trust life enough to let go. Buddhism teaches that the deepest form of suffering comes not from pain itself, but from the lack of trust in life. When trust is missing, every change feels dangerous, every pause feels threatening, and every unknown feels unbearable. The mind becomes tense, constantly scanning for what might go wrong next. Life begins to feel like something you must defend yourself against, rather than something you are allowed to live within. Many people believe happiness will come once life becomes stable, predictable, and secure. They wait for the perfect conditions before allowing themselves to relax. They tell themselves they will be at peace once problems are solved, relationships settle, and the future feels certain. Buddhism gently reveals a different truth. That moment rarely arrives. Life remains fluid, uncertain, and unfinished. If happiness depends on certainty, it will always remain just out of reach. Trusting life does not mean believing that everything will always go well. It means trusting your ability to meet whatever arises without breaking. It means understanding that you have survived uncertainty before, even when you thought you would not. When trust grows, fear loses its grip. The mind no longer panics at every change. The heart no longer collapses at every loss. Fighting life often comes from the belief that letting go means losing control, losing identity, or losing safety. Buddhism teaches that what you actually lose is unnecessary suffering. When you let go of constant resistance, you stop exhausting yourself emotionally. You stop tightening your body against imagined threats. You stop living as if peace must be earned through struggle. Trust allows you to soften into the present moment. Instead of living inside worry about what might happen, you begin to live inside what is happening. The simple acts of breathing, walking, listening, and resting regain their quiet richness. You notice how much beauty exists even in imperfect moments. This awareness does not erase pain, but it balances it with presence. Letting go also means releasing the need to control how life unfolds emotionally. You stop demanding that experiences feel a certain way. You allow joy without clinging to it. You allow sadness without turning it into despair. You allow uncertainty without turning it into anxiety. In this openness, emotions move freely instead of becoming stuck. The heart becomes lighter because it is no longer guarded at all times. Buddhism teaches that clinging to certainty is one of the greatest sources of fear. The mind wants guarantees. It wants promises that nothing will be lost and nothing will change. But life offers no such contracts. Everything arises, changes, and passes. When you accept this truth deeply, something surprising happens. You stop being afraid of living. You stop holding back from experiences because you are afraid of their ending. Trusting life also means trusting impermanence. You understand that pain will not last forever, just as joy does not. You learn to move through experiences without demanding permanence from them. This understanding creates emotional resilience. You no longer collapse when things end, because you were never clinging to them as if they were meant to stay. Many people believe letting go means becoming detached from life. Buddhism teaches the opposite. Letting go allows you to engage with life more fully. When you are not constantly protecting yourself from loss, you are free to love more openly, experience more deeply, and live more honestly. You stop living half-present, always preparing for disappointment. Trust also changes how you relate to the future. Instead of anxiously planning every possible outcome, you begin to trust that clarity will come when it is needed. You take the next step without demanding to see the entire path. This does not make you careless. It makes you grounded. You move forward with awareness rather than fear. Over time, trusting life creates a quiet confidence that does not depend on success or approval. You stop measuring your worth by outcomes. You stop judging your life based on comparisons. You begin to feel at home within yourself, regardless of external circumstances. This inner stability is the foundation of lasting happiness in Buddhism. Happiness, in this sense, is not excitement or constant pleasure. It is a steady sense of peace that remains even when life is imperfect. It is the ability to sit with yourself without restlessness. It is the feeling of being okay with not having all the answers. It is the relief that comes when you finally stop fighting what cannot be controlled. When you trust life enough to let go, you discover that happiness was never something you needed to chase. It was something waiting beneath resistance. The moment you release the struggle, happiness does not explode into existence. It settles quietly, like calm water after a storm. And in that stillness, you realize that life was never your enemy. It was only asking you to stop fighting and start living. 8. Letting go is not losing yourself. It is finally coming home. Many people resist letting go because they believe it means losing something essential. They fear that if they stop holding on, they will lose their identity, their purpose, or their sense of direction. Buddhism teaches something far gentler and far more liberating. Letting go is not about losing who you are. It is about releasing everything that was never truly you to begin with. From an early age, the mind learns to build itself around roles, expectations, labels, and stories. You become the one who must succeed, the one who must be strong, the one who must be needed, the one who must not fail. Over time, these identities feel solid and real, even though they are constantly changing. When life threatens these roles through loss, change, or uncertainty, fear arises. The mind clings tightly, believing that without these identities, nothing remains. Buddhism teaches that this fear comes from misunderstanding the self. The true self is not the story you tell about yourself. It is not your achievements, your relationships, your status, or your struggles. It is the awareness that experiences all of these things. When you cling to identities, you suffer because identities are fragile. They depend on conditions that can change at any moment. Letting go means loosening your grip on the idea that you must always be someone specific in order to be worthy or safe. It means allowing yourself to exist without constantly proving, defending, or defining yourself. This can feel uncomfortable at first, because the mind is used to tension. It mistakes struggle for stability. When struggle fades, the mind feels unfamiliar, even empty. But this emptiness is not loss. It is space. In Buddhism, this space is deeply important. It is the space where peace grows. When you stop clinging to who you think you must be, you begin to experience who you already are beneath effort and fear. You notice moments of stillness that were always present, but never felt because the mind was too busy holding on. Letting go also changes how you relate to the past. Many people carry old versions of themselves like heavy luggage. Past mistakes, past pain, past identities continue to shape how they see themselves today. Buddhism teaches that the past only survives through attachment. When you loosen your grip, the past loses its power to define the present. This does not mean forgetting or denying what has happened. It means allowing the past to rest. It means recognizing that growth requires release. Just as a tree must let go of old leaves to grow new ones, the heart must release outdated identities to remain alive and flexible. Letting go also softens the fear of the future. When identity is no longer rigid, uncertainty becomes less threatening. You no longer panic at the idea of not knowing exactly who you will become. You begin to trust that whatever unfolds, you will meet it with awareness rather than resistance. This trust creates inner freedom. Buddhism teaches that suffering increases when the mind demands continuity in a world that is constantly changing. Letting go allows you to move with life instead of against it. You stop forcing yourself to fit into old patterns that no longer serve you. You stop fearing change as if it were destruction. You begin to see change as movement, not loss. There is a deep relief that comes when you stop carrying the burden of being someone all the time. You begin to rest more easily in the present moment. You respond rather than perform. You live rather than manage your life. This simplicity does not make life smaller. It makes it more honest. Letting go also changes how you experience connection with others. When identity softens, relationships become lighter. You no longer need people to confirm who you are. You no longer fear disagreement as a threat to your worth. You allow people to come and go without believing that their presence or absence defines you. Love becomes freer because it is no longer tangled with fear. In Buddhism, the deepest letting go is the letting go of the illusion that you must hold everything together. Life does not require constant gripping. It requires participation, awareness, and compassion. When you release the belief that you must control, define, and secure everything, you finally experience rest. Coming home to yourself does not feel dramatic. It feels quiet. It feels like exhaling after holding your breath for a very long time. It feels like realizing you were never broken, only tense. You were never lost, only gripping too tightly. Letting go is not an ending. It is a return to simplicity, a return to presence, a return to the part of you that existed before fear taught you to cling. And in that return, peace does not need to be created. It is simply remembered. 9. True freedom begins when you stop needing life to be different. Buddhism teaches that one of the deepest sources of human suffering is the belief that life must change before you can be at peace. The mind quietly convinces itself that happiness exists somewhere in the future, waiting behind better circumstances, better people, better timing, or a better version of yourself. As long as this belief remains, peace is always postponed. You are never fully here. You are always waiting. Many people live in a constant state of inner negotiation with life. They tell themselves they will relax once things settle. They will be grateful once problems are solved. They will feel whole once they reach a certain point or leave a painful chapter behind. Buddhism gently reveals that this way of living keeps the heart trapped. Life continues to move, but peace never arrives because it was never meant to depend on conditions. The need for life to be different creates constant dissatisfaction. Even good moments are overshadowed by the thought that something is missing or could be better. The mind compares the present to an imagined ideal and quietly rejects what is happening now. This rejection is subtle, but it is powerful. It turns ordinary moments into sources of irritation, boredom, or restlessness. Buddhism teaches that freedom begins the moment you stop demanding that life rearrange itself to make you comfortable. This does not mean you stop growing, improving, or making wise choices. It means you stop withholding peace until everything meets your expectations. You learn to meet life as it is, without closing your heart. When the mind needs life to be different, it is never satisfied. If things go well, it worries about how long it will last. If things go badly, it feels defeated. This constant evaluation keeps the nervous system alert and tense. The body never fully relaxes because the mind is always scanning for what should change next. Letting go of this need is deeply unsettling at first. The mind is used to striving, fixing, and comparing. When those habits soften, there can be a feeling of emptiness or vulnerability. Buddhism teaches that this feeling is not danger. It is openness. It is the space where peace enters when resistance leaves. True freedom does not come from shaping life perfectly. It comes from being okay with life being imperfect. When you stop insisting that happiness requires different circumstances, you begin to discover moments of contentment that were always present but never noticed. The sound of your breath, the warmth of sunlight, the quiet satisfaction of simply being alive without trying to fix anything. This freedom also changes how you relate to pain. Pain still arises, but it no longer defines your entire experience. You feel sadness without collapsing into despair. You experience disappointment without turning it into self-criticism. You allow discomfort without immediately trying to escape it. In this allowance, pain becomes part of life rather than a personal failure. Buddhism teaches that the present moment is the only place where freedom exists. When the mind insists that life must be different, it abandons the present and lives in resistance. When you release that insistence, you return to now, and in now you discover that you are more resilient, more grounded, and more capable than you believed. The need for life to be different often comes from fear. Fear of being stuck, fear of missing out, fear of not becoming who you hope to be. Buddhism invites you to look at this fear gently, to see that it is built on stories rather than reality. You are not trapped because life is imperfect. You are trapped because you believe peace depends on perfection. When this belief loosens, identity softens. You stop defining yourself by what is missing. You stop measuring your worth by comparison. You stop viewing your life as incomplete. You begin to experience a quiet sense of enoughness that does not depend on achievement or validation. This does not make you passive or indifferent. It makes you grounded. From this groundedness, action becomes clearer. You make changes because they feel aligned, not because you are running from discomfort. You move forward without urgency. You rest without guilt. You engage with life without needing it to confirm your value. True freedom also brings compassion. When you stop demanding that your own life be different, you stop demanding that others meet impossible expectations. You allow people to be human. You release resentment. You forgive more easily, not because you excuse harm, but because you no longer carry the weight of needing everything to be fair. Buddhism teaches that liberation is not found by escaping life, but by fully entering it without resistance. When you stop needing life to be different, you stop fighting reality. And when the fight ends, energy returns. Attention sharpens. Gratitude arises naturally, not because life is perfect, but because you are no longer at war with it. Freedom, in this sense, is quiet. It does not announce itself. It feels like ease in your own body. It feels like being able to sit with yourself without restlessness. It feels like trusting that whatever arises, you can meet it without breaking. When you stop needing life to be different, you stop postponing happiness. You stop chasing peace. You realize that freedom was never hidden in a future version of your life. It was waiting patiently beneath resistance, ready to appear the moment you allowed life to be exactly as it is. 10. Peace is not something you achieve. It is what remains when you stop struggling. Buddhism teaches that one of the greatest misunderstandings about peace is the belief that it must be earned. Many people live as if peace is a reward waiting at the end of effort, discipline, healing, or success. They believe that once they fix themselves, resolve their problems, or reach a certain stage in life, peace will finally arrive. Until then, they remain tense, impatient, and self-critical, believing they are not yet allowed to rest. This belief quietly keeps the mind in a constant state of struggle. Even when life is calm, the mind searches for what still needs improvement. Even when progress is made, it feels insufficient. Buddhism reveals a gentle truth. Peace is not something you add to your life. It is something that naturally remains when unnecessary struggle is removed. From a Buddhist perspective, the mind is already capable of peace. It becomes disturbed only when it clings, resists, judges, or demands. The more you fight your thoughts, emotions, and circumstances, the further peace seems to drift away. Struggle creates noise, resistance creates tension, control creates anxiety. When these patterns soften, peace quietly returns on its own. Many people mistake inner struggle for growth. They believe that if they are not pushing themselves, fixing themselves, or judging themselves, they are failing. Buddhism teaches that excessive striving often blocks clarity rather than creating it. A mind that is constantly forcing change is rarely able to see clearly. It becomes tight, impatient, and disconnected from the present moment. When you stop struggling against yourself, a profound shift occurs. You stop treating your inner world like a problem that must be solved. You stop attacking your thoughts for being negative or your emotions for being uncomfortable. You allow yourself to be human without turning that humanity into a flaw. In this allowance, the mind begins to soften and peace finds space to emerge. Peace does not mean the absence of thoughts or emotions. Buddhism does not teach emotional numbness or mental silence as the goal. Peace means you are no longer at war with what arises. Thoughts come and go without dragging you into conflict. Emotions move through you without overwhelming your sense of self. You experience life without constantly resisting its texture. Struggle also appears in the way people relate to time. Many live with the belief that the present moment is not enough. They rush toward the future or dwell in the past, believing peace exists somewhere else. Buddhism teaches that peace only exists here. The moment you stop mentally leaving the present to fight, fix, or regret, you arrive at a place of natural stillness. Letting go of struggle does not mean abandoning effort or responsibility. It means changing the quality of effort. You act without tension. You improve without self-hatred. You grow without believing that something is wrong with you. This kind of effort is sustainable and gentle. It does not exhaust the nervous system or harden the heart. Buddhism teaches that much of inner conflict comes from unrealistic expectations of ourselves. We expect constant happiness, constant strength, constant clarity. When we fall short of these ideals, we judge ourselves harshly. This judgment creates more suffering than the original difficulty. When you release the demand to be perfect, peace naturally expands. Peace also deepens when you stop struggling with uncertainty. Life does not offer guarantees. The mind suffers when it insists on certainty before allowing calm. Buddhism teaches that uncertainty is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be accepted. When you stop fighting not knowing, you discover a surprising sense of freedom. You realize that you do not need all the answers to live meaningfully. As struggle fades, awareness becomes clearer. You notice small moments of ease that were always present, but overshadowed by effort. The rhythm of your breath, the feeling of sitting still, the quiet satisfaction of simply existing. These moments do not depend on achievement. They arise naturally when resistance ends. Peace also transforms how you relate to others. When you are no longer struggling internally, you stop projecting tension outward. You listen more openly. You react less defensively. You allow others to be imperfect without feeling threatened. Relationships become less about control and more about presence. Buddhism teaches that peace is your natural state when the mind is not interfering with life. Just as clear water becomes muddy only when disturbed, the mind becomes restless only when constantly stirred by desire, fear, and resistance. When stirring stops, clarity returns without effort. The deepest peace arises when you stop struggling with the idea of who you should be. You release the pressure to constantly improve your identity. You allow yourself to unfold naturally. Growth continues, but it is no longer driven by dissatisfaction. It is guided by awareness and compassion. Peace is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It feels like relief. It feels like resting inside yourself without needing to escape. It feels like being okay with the moment as it is, even when it is imperfect. This peace is stable because it does not depend on conditions. When you stop struggling, life does not suddenly become easy, but it becomes honest. You meet challenges without inner violence. You face pain without adding fear. You move forward without dragging unnecessary weight behind you. Buddhism teaches that liberation is not achieved through force. It is realized through release. The moment you stop struggling with life, with yourself, and with the present moment, peace does not need to be created. It is already there, waiting quietly beneath the effort. 11. Letting go is not weakness. It is the deepest form of inner strength. Buddhism teaches that many people misunderstand strength. They believe strength means holding on, enduring silently, pushing through pain, or refusing to break no matter how heavy life becomes. From the outside, this can look admirable, but inside, it often creates exhaustion, emotional numbness, and quiet suffering. True strength, according to Buddhism, is not about how much you can carry. It is about knowing what no longer needs to be carried at all. Letting go is often mistaken for giving up, losing, or failing. The mind fears that if it releases its grip, everything will fall apart. But Buddhism teaches that clinging is not stability. Clinging is tension. It keeps the body tight, the mind restless, and the heart guarded. Strength that comes from clinging is brittle. It breaks under pressure because it relies on control. Real strength is flexible. It bends without collapsing. It adapts without resisting. It knows when to move forward and when to soften. Letting go is an act of wisdom, not surrender. It requires honesty, awareness, and courage. It means seeing clearly that some struggles are not making you stronger, only heavier. Many people hold on out of fear, fear of being alone, fear of losing identity, fear of being seen as weak, fear of uncertainty. Buddhism invites you to look closely at this fear, to see how much energy it consumes, to see how it shapes decisions, relationships, and self-worth. When fear is examined gently, it begins to lose its authority. Letting go does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop suffering unnecessarily. You stop repeating the same inner battles long after they have stopped serving you. You stop clinging to expectations that reality has already moved beyond. This requires immense inner strength because the mind prefers familiarity, even when familiarity hurts. Buddhism teaches that clinging to pain can become an identity. People hold on to stories about what happened to them, what they lost, or how they were wronged. These stories feel protective, as if they preserve meaning or justice. But over time, they become prisons. Letting go of these stories can feel like losing a part of yourself. In truth, it is reclaiming yourself. Strength is also found in allowing vulnerability. When you let go, you allow uncertainty to exist without panic. You allow grief to move through you without becoming bitterness. You allow change without demanding guarantees. This openness requires far more courage than emotional armor ever could. Buddhism teaches that resistance hardens the heart. Letting go softens it without making it weak. A softened heart can feel deeply without being destroyed. It can love without clinging. It can face loss without collapsing. This is the quiet strength of awareness. Letting go also means releasing the need to be right all the time. Many inner conflicts are fueled by the desire to justify oneself, prove worth, or defend identity. Buddhism teaches that peace is not found in winning internal arguments. It is found in stepping out of them. When you let go of the need to constantly protect your ego, energy is freed for understanding and compassion. True strength allows you to rest. It does not equate rest with laziness or failure. It understands that exhaustion clouds wisdom. When you stop forcing yourself to be strong in ways that hurt you, the nervous system begins to heal. The mind becomes clearer. Decisions become wiser. Letting go also changes how you relate to pain. Pain no longer becomes proof that you are failing. It becomes information. It becomes something you can listen to rather than fight. Buddhism teaches that pain is part of life, but suffering multiplies when pain is resisted. Strength lies in meeting pain honestly without adding fear or judgment. There is also strength in allowing endings. Many people cling because they believe letting go means something was wasted. Buddhism teaches that nothing is wasted. Every experience leaves understanding behind. Letting go does not erase what happened. It allows its lesson to remain without the burden of attachment. As you let go, you may notice moments of emptiness. The mind may feel quiet, unfamiliar, or even uneasy. Buddhism teaches that this space is not a void. It is openness. It is the ground from which clarity and peace grow. When the mind stops gripping, it creates room for insight. Strength grows when you trust yourself enough to release what you can no longer control. You stop measuring your worth by endurance alone. You begin to honor discernment. You recognize that walking away, resting, or releasing can be acts of wisdom rather than defeat. Buddhism teaches that liberation is not dramatic. It does not arrive with force. It comes gently, often unnoticed, when you stop clinging to what hurts. It comes when you choose peace over pride, clarity over control, and awareness over resistance. Letting go is not the absence of strength. It is strength refined. It is the strength to stop carrying what was never meant to be carried forever. And in that release, you do not become smaller. You become lighter, clearer, and more free. 12. When you stop fighting life, compassion naturally replaces suffering. Buddhism teaches that suffering narrows the heart, while acceptance opens it. When you are constantly fighting life, much of your energy is spent protecting yourself. You become defensive, reactive, and guarded. Even kindness begins to feel conditional, offered only when circumstances feel safe or favorable. The mind believes that if it softens, it will be hurt again. But Buddhism reveals a quiet truth. It is not softness that causes suffering, it is resistance. When you stop fighting life, something subtle but profound changes inside you. The inner tension that once demanded constant defense begins to loosen. You are no longer bracing yourself against every experience. As the grip of resistance weakens, compassion begins to arise naturally, not as a moral effort, but as a natural response to understanding. Compassion in Buddhism does not begin with others. It begins with yourself. When you stop fighting life, you stop fighting your own humanity. You allow yourself to be imperfect without condemnation. You allow mistakes without self-punishment. You allow pain without turning it into shame. This self-compassion is not indulgence, it is clarity. It is recognizing that suffering is not solved through harshness, but through understanding. Many people believe they must be hard on themselves in order to grow. They believe self-criticism keeps them disciplined and strong. Buddhism teaches that this harshness only deepens suffering. A mind that is constantly attacked becomes fearful, rigid, and exhausted. Growth does not flourish in an environment of inner violence. It flourishes where there is patience, honesty, and care. When you stop fighting life, you also stop demanding that you always be okay. You allow yourself to experience difficulty without believing something has gone wrong. This acceptance creates emotional spaciousness. You no longer rush to escape discomfort. You stay present with it long enough to understand it. In this presence, suffering transforms. As compassion grows inwardly, it naturally extends outward. When you are no longer at war with your own experience, you stop projecting that war onto others. You become less judgmental, not because you force tolerance, but because you recognize shared humanity. You see that others, too, are shaped by causes and conditions beyond their full control. Buddhism teaches that people act from their own suffering, fears, and attachments. When you are fighting life, this understanding is hard to access. The mind is too busy defending itself to see clearly. When you let go of resistance, clarity returns. You begin to see behavior without immediately personalizing it. This does not mean you accept harm or abandon boundaries. It means you respond with wisdom rather than anger. Compassion does not make you passive. It makes you grounded. When resistance fades, you gain the ability to choose responses rather than react automatically. You speak with intention. You act with discernment. You protect yourself without hatred. This balanced strength is central to Buddhist wisdom. Letting go also softens the way you relate to suffering in the world. When you are no longer consumed by your own inner struggle, you have more capacity to care. You listen more deeply. You offer presence instead of advice. You understand that not all suffering needs to be fixed. Sometimes it needs to be witnessed. Buddhism teaches that suffering is a universal experience. Fighting life isolates you, making your pain feel personal and unique. Letting go reconnects you to the shared human condition. You realize you are not broken for struggling, you are human. This realization dissolves loneliness and replaces it with quiet belonging. Compassion also changes how you relate to time. You stop rushing healing. You stop pressuring yourself to move on before you are ready. You understand that growth unfolds in its own rhythm. When you allow this rhythm, patience arises naturally. You meet each moment with gentleness instead of urgency. As resistance dissolves, gratitude begins to appear without effort, not because life is perfect, but because you are no longer focused solely on what is wrong. You notice small moments of ease, a quiet breath, a moment of understanding, a simple connection. These moments were always present, but resistance kept them hidden. Buddhism teaches that awakening is not a dramatic event. It is a gradual softening. It is the slow replacement of struggle with understanding. When you stop fighting life, you stop seeing it as something to survive. You begin to experience it as something to participate in. Compassion deepens your relationship with uncertainty. You stop treating not knowing as a threat. You allow questions to exist without demanding immediate answers. This openness reduces anxiety and creates trust. You trust the unfolding, not because it is predictable, but because you are no longer afraid of meeting it. When compassion replaces suffering, the heart becomes resilient without becoming hard. You feel deeply without being overwhelmed. You care without clinging. You engage without losing yourself. This balance is the fruit of letting go. Buddhism teaches that the end of suffering is not found in controlling life, but in understanding it. Understanding arises when resistance ends. Compassion arises when understanding deepens. And peace arises naturally when compassion becomes the foundation of how you meet the world. When you stop fighting life, you do not become indifferent. You become present. You become kind. You become steady. You discover that suffering was never asking you to struggle harder. It was asking you to soften, to see clearly, and to let go. And in that letting go, compassion becomes your natural state, not something you force, but something that remains when the war inside finally ends. 13. When you fully let go, life stops feeling like a burden and starts feeling like a flow. Buddhism teaches that much of what makes life feel heavy is not life itself, but the way we carry it. The mind turns experiences into burdens by holding them too tightly, by personalizing everything that happens, and by believing it must constantly manage, judge, and control the unfolding of events. Over time, this creates the feeling that life is something to survive rather than something to live. Many people wake up each day already tired, not because of what they must do, but because of what they are carrying inside. Old worries, unresolved emotions, expectations about how the day should go, fears about the future, and regrets about the past all move silently with them. Buddhism teaches that this inner weight is created by attachment and resistance, not by reality itself. When you fully let go, life does not suddenly become easy, but it becomes lighter. The difference is subtle yet profound. You stop dragging unnecessary weight behind you. You stop reliving moments that no longer exist. You stop anticipating problems that have not yet arrived. The mind becomes more present, and presence brings ease. Letting go fully means releasing the belief that you must constantly be prepared for disappointment. Many people live in quiet tension, believing that if they relax, something will go wrong. Buddhism teaches that this constant readiness is not protection. It is suffering rehearsed in advance. When you let go of this habit, the body begins to trust rest again. The nervous system softens. Peace becomes possible in ordinary moments. Flow, in Buddhism, is not about excitement or constant pleasure. It is about alignment with reality. When you stop fighting what is happening, you begin moving with it. Actions feel more natural. Decisions feel less forced. You respond instead of react. Even challenges are met with clarity rather than panic. Life begins to feel less like a series of obstacles and more like a continuous movement. Just as a river does not stop to argue with rocks, You stop arguing with difficulty. You move around it, through it, or past it, without losing your sense of direction. This flexibility is the result of letting go. Fully letting go also changes how you relate to effort. You still act, you still care, you still participate. But effort no longer comes from fear or urgency, it comes from presence. You do what needs to be done without carrying emotional resistance alongside the action. This makes effort lighter and more effective. Buddhism teaches that resistance wastes energy. Two people can face the same situation, but the one who resists suffers more. When resistance drops, energy that was once consumed by inner struggle becomes available for living. Creativity increases, awareness sharpens, even rest becomes deeper. Letting go fully also means releasing the belief that life must always feel meaningful or pleasant. You allow neutral moments to exist without boredom. You allow quiet periods without restlessness. You allow simplicity without constantly seeking stimulation. This acceptance brings a quiet contentment that does not depend on excitement. As life begins to feel lighter, gratitude arises naturally, not forced gratitude, but a gentle appreciation for moments that were previously overlooked. A calm breath, a moment of understanding, a simple connection. These experiences were always present, but the weight of resistance made them hard to feel. Flow also changes how you experience time. When you are no longer fighting life, you stop rushing through moments. You stop trying to escape the present for a better future. Time feels more spacious. Moments feel fuller. You are no longer living ahead of yourself. Buddhism teaches that the sense of burden comes from the illusion of separation, the belief that life is happening to you rather than through you. When you let go fully, this separation softens. You feel less like an isolated individual struggling against the world, and more like a part of the unfolding itself. This does not erase individuality, it deepens it. You become more yourself, not less. You stop performing identity and start inhabiting it naturally. You respond authentically rather than defensively. You trust your inner compass instead of constantly seeking external confirmation. Letting go fully also brings acceptance of rhythm. You stop demanding constant progress. You allow cycles of activity and rest, growth and pause, engagement and withdrawal. Buddhism teaches that life moves in rhythms, not straight lines. When you accept this, guilt around rest dissolves and patience deepens. Flow also brings a sense of quiet joy, not excitement, but ease. The joy of not being at war with yourself. The joy of not carrying more than necessary. The joy of trusting the moment enough to be present within it. When difficulties arise, they no longer feel like interruptions to life. They are recognized as part of it. You meet them without resentment. You learn without self-blame. You move forward without bitterness. This resilience is not forced. It is the natural outcome of letting go. Buddhism teaches that awakening is not found by accumulating insight, but by releasing obstruction. When the weight of resistance falls away, life flows naturally. Peace does not need to be manufactured. Meaning does not need to be chased. They arise quietly as byproducts of alignment. When you fully let go, you stop asking life to be lighter. You stop demanding it to be different. You simply stop adding weight. And in that simplicity, life begins to carry you instead of the other way around. Life stops feeling like a burden not because it has changed, but because you have stopped gripping it. What remains is movement without struggle, effort without tension, and presence without fear. This is the quiet freedom Buddhism points toward. Not escape from life, but full participation without resistance. And in this flow, you realize that peace was never somewhere else. It was waiting beneath the weight you no longer needed to carry. Buddhism teaches that life was never meant to be a battlefield. It was never meant to be something you conquer, control, or survive through constant struggle. Much of the misery people experience does not come from life itself, but from the quiet war they fight inside their own mind. A war against reality, a war against change. A war against their own emotions, fears, and imperfections. Through these lessons, one truth slowly reveals itself. The more you fight life, the heavier it becomes. The more you resist what is happening, the more exhausted you feel. And the more you try to force happiness, peace, or certainty, the further they seem to move away. This is not because you are doing something wrong. It is because peace cannot exist where resistance lives. Letting go is not a single moment. It is a gentle practice. It is the repeated choice to stop arguing with reality, to stop demanding that life explain itself on your timeline, to stop believing that you must hold everything together in order to be okay. Each time you release resistance, even slightly, the heart becomes lighter. When you stop fighting life, you stop fighting yourself. You allow your emotions to move without becoming trapped inside them. You allow change without turning it into fear. You allow uncertainty without panic. In this allowance, the mind begins to rest. And when the mind rests, clarity naturally appears. Peace, in Buddhism, is not something you chase. It is what remains when the struggle ends. It is not loud or dramatic. It feels like relief, like exhaling after holding your breath for a long time. It feels like coming home to yourself without needing to be different. Life will still change. People will still come and go. Joy and pain will still arise. Buddhism does not promise a life without difficulty. It offers something deeper. A way of meeting life without unnecessary suffering. A way of living without being crushed by what you cannot control. When you stop fighting life, compassion replaces hardness. Understanding replaces blame. Presence replaces anxiety. You begin to see that you were never broken. You were only tense. You were never lost. You were only gripping too tightly. This is where happiness truly begins. Not when life becomes perfect, but when you stop demanding perfection from it. Not when everything makes sense, but when you allow mystery without fear. Not when struggle disappears, but when struggle is no longer treated as an enemy. Letting go does not make you passive. It makes you wise. It does not make you weak. It makes you free. Free to live without constant resistance. Free to feel without being overwhelmed. Free to move forward without carrying unnecessary weight. Buddhism teaches that awakening is not about becoming someone new. It is about releasing what you were never meant to carry. When that weight falls away, life begins to flow. Effort becomes natural. Peace becomes steady, and happiness no longer feels distant or fragile. So if you remember nothing else, remember this. You do not need to fight life to live fully. You do not need to struggle to deserve peace. The moment you stop resisting what is, life meets you with the same softness. And in that softness, you discover the quiet truth Buddhism has always pointed toward. Happiness begins the moment you stop fighting life and finally allow yourself to live it.